spiritual development, Kundalini awakening, it's a universal human phenomena. And so if it's universal, well, then it will arise throughout the globe, throughout history, and it clearly has. And so if it arises in one part of the world that hasn't had contact with another part of the world, the experience is so profound that they are bound to create a cultural system around it and bound to revere those that have achieved a high degree of spiritual development. And all sorts of motifs and language arises out of that. And so that's why we have a Kuan Yin, and we have the Buddha, and we have Shiva. Ultimately, they are the manifestations of the same God, the same field, right? And those who are experiencing the spiritual development process within themselves typically are very easily able to recognize the universal nature. And that's
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I'm your humble servant and Sifu Taoist Master Sun Qing. And it is, and I repeat myself, a lot of people feel like I repeat myself, but it is Christmas morning for me once again. The universe has brought to me, basically a manifestation perhaps, but another incredible being expressing a incredible mastery of something that I'm very fond of in relation to internal alchemy and cultivation. I want to welcome Brent Spirit. How are you, my friend?
well, I'm fantastic, thank you. And this is like Christmas morning for me too. I'm really excited for this conversation to see where it goes.
Oh, yes, yes. And I mean, my audience, with the types of material that I sort of cover, are very, very excited about these types of conversations. And I really want to bring forth, mastery like yourself, an insight into something that is conceptual to most people. It really doesn't. And so, in a deeper nature of understanding, how about you just give the audience a little insight into how we got to this very moment?
Well, it's been quite a journey over many lifetimes, you could say, but I'll see what comes out. Every time I share my story, something different comes out. It's all a bit of a blur at times, and so we'll just see, what I'm inspired to share. Earlier on, we were chatting a little bit about our journey, so I'll try and weave in some of the themes that we can touch upon. But in short, the Kundalini awakening journey has been the centerpiece of my development, my spiritual development, my evolution. Of course, Kundalini comes out of the yogic systems out of India, referring to that in its dormant state, it's that potential, that evolutionary potential, that life force, that Shakti. And of course, with spiritual practices, with the right approach, it can be awakened. And when that energy is awakened within the individual, the spiritual journey just really takes off. And so for me, my journey began, I guess you could say, looking back in hindsight, I can look at my childhood and see that there was some really expanded states of awareness going on, even in early childhood. I would lay in bed before sleep, and I would go into a meditative space of total emptiness, just a field of awareness, and I could just observe my mind, my thoughts, just arising and passing away in this field. And to me, this was ordinary. It was nothing notable. It was just, this was life. Looking back, I recognize that I was actually in a very expanded state of consciousness, in a sort of samadhi type state, you could say. But as an innocent child, I didn't know what that was. And so I lived in this space, generally speaking, in and out for much of my childhood. But eventually, as I began to develop, I began to be given reason to identify with my mind, identify with my body. I began to lose that expanded state of awareness. And eventually, in my teenage years, I experienced some anxiety, some depression, and essentially it was a major contraction in my consciousness. So rather than being open and expanded, there was a major contraction in which I found myself trapped in my mind, unable to access any of those expanded states that I had, access to as a child. And I felt as if I was suffocating in my mind, very small space that I could exist in. And at this time, the depression, the anxiety, I turned towards religion. I was brought up Catholic, and I found there's nothing really there for me. There's no answers. And so I turned towards atheism, and atheism served me because it taught me to question and to question the conditioning, the culture, the belief systems that were, I was told were true. I got to question those, and the ability to question was very empowering. I realized, well, I've got as much of a shot at figuring out what's going on here as anybody else, because for the most part, we're all just trying to figure it out. And so I was very empowering for me. I thought I don't have to take secondhand wisdom for someone else. I can find out for myself. And so, like this, I eventually found my way to practice, of course, of meditation. Feeling very depressed, very anxious, hearing meditation can, relieve some of this. So, innocently, I sat in meditation. I must have been, I was 15 years old. And I remember sitting there on the couch, turning inwards. Not really sure what that meant, but I thought, let me try this. I'll turn inwards, like they say, in meditation. And the moment that I did this, I found myself going into spontaneous kriyas. So kriyas are, of course, a Sanskrit word referring to spontaneous movements of the physical body, spontaneous vocalization, spontaneous energetic movements. So for me, these particular kriyas I was experienced were my spine was bending, my neck was bending, and I was actually being drawn spontaneously into a yogic body lock, which is called Jalandhara Bandha. So the chin makes its way to the chest, that closes off the windpipe, blocking the prana, concentrating the prana in the spinal column. So I was called into this spontaneously. So innocent child, just trying to stop being depressed, and suddenly my head is being moved as if I'm almost possessed by some sort of entity, by some sort of, maybe you could say, as a demon, was forcing my head, forcing my chin down to my chest. And my spine was bending a little bit there as well. And I quickly, I found that I couldn't bring my head back up until I opened my eyes and returned back into the external world. And then I thought, whoa, that was really freaky. I don't know what that was. I'm not going to do this meditation thing anymore. Not going to really explore that. I don't know what that was. Um, I didn't make much note of it after that. I didn't contemplate it. I didn't tell the story over to anybody. I didn't look it up. It was a blip, just a very brief blip on my journey. However, I found some of the benefits of walking mindfully, working mindfully, trying to practice mindfulness in my everyday life. And that was very beneficial for me. I understood the present moment is all there is. My anxiety about the future, uh, though a valid experience, it was, unfounded because the future doesn't exist. My worry, my regrets about the past, the constant replaying of past events in my life causing me to feel depressed, down. Also, valid emotional experience, but unfounded because the past isn't real. So I found myself committing very early on. I said, for the rest of my life, being in the present moment will be the sole focus. My sole mission will oscillate around this point here, abiding in the present moment. Uh, Work, relationships, life, that will all come and go. But the present moment, that's where the rubber meets the road for me. And so that's where I committed to my journey from. So from there, I began to read far and wide. And I found a diamond at the center of all of the teachings. In Buddhism, it was there. In Christianity, it was there in the mystical traditions of Christianity. In Hinduism, in yoga, as well as in Taoism. Sancheng, I know, of course, Taoist master. I mean, Tao Te Ching, I remember making my way through this text. And I can admit, for the most part, I didn't understand a word that was being said here, but there was something in me that said, I really like this. I don't understand a word of it, but I really like this. It's really speaking to something deeper than my mind. And so there was this, I guess you could say, an energetic transmission taking place in reading Tao Te Ching. Um, and of course, I think it's maybe the first line, the Tao that can be spoken is not the true Tao. And that line, I think, gave me permission to not understand intellectually the words. It invited me into a deeper transmission that was being shared through those words. And so that transmission took place in Tao Te Ching, but also in many of the other texts. But I know, of course, Taoism is a great thread that we can explore together, which I don't have much experience or knowledge about, but I do see the validity there of the transmission. And so, moving ahead on my journey, there was some psychedelic exploration, connecting with the plants, connecting with the intelligence, of course, of the plants. I found myself over time having these sporadic experiences of once again expanded awareness like I did as a child. No longer feeling suffocated by my mind, no longer feeling suffocated by just this body. Texts like Bhagavad Gita explained to me that I'm not this body. And I remember I read this on the bus from home from university. I was reading Bhagavad Gita and I had this realization: I'm not this body. I'm really not. And I laughed. I laughed like a madman on the bus. So insights like this were coming, and they were reminding me of what I knew as a child, that I was this expanded presence, and I began to have access to that once again. And so over time, eventually, there was a realization in the level of the mind, where there was this energetic explosion in my head, and I couldn't find this idea of Brent anymore. This idea of me, of I, of the ego. I could see quite clearly that all that was ever going on, all that will ever go on, was just in my head. There's a field of awareness, and a thought arises one at a time. And after that thought arises, it passes away, and there's a bit of a pause, and then another thought would arise. And I thought, for some reason, I took this intermittent arising and passing away of thoughts to be a an entity, a solid being there. And I understood it's actually not. It's kind of like if I held up a flashcard and then I put that card away, and I held up another one and I put that one away. You wouldn't say, oh my God, Brent, there's an individual there. You just say it's just one flashcard arising at a time. There's no entity there. There's no ego there. There's no self there. It's just a fleeting blip in a field of awareness. So I understood, well, I never was this mind. I never was this body. Then I looked out at the world and I understood that even the world is just atoms, molecules, particles arising and passing away, arising and passing away. And I thought, oh my God, none of this is real. This is all a projection. And I interpreted it to be solid and interpreted it to have a sense of separation, as if I'm here and the world is out there. But it's all one field of just particles arising and passing away. Some of those particles and phenomena are thoughts, atoms, quarks, whatever it may be. So I got kind of spooked now. I said, I think I'm dreaming, because this is kind of like what happens in a dream. You know, I close my eyes at night and I'm able to manifest the whole dream world. So looking at the text once again in Zen, in Advaita Vedanta, in Buddhism, they were speaking about what I was touching upon here. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. I understood this. I understood what it means, to the world is an illusion. But what was missing here was I didn't feel a great sense of peace. I didn't feel a great sense of fulfillment or salvation. I felt horrified. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know, well, what does this mean for my relationships? If I'm not real, I'm not a real entity, and neither are the people that I'm trying to have a conversation with, where do I go from here? The world became a very cold place. And so over time, I eventually recognized that this was an energetic opening in my head alone, but it did not involve the rest of my system, the rest of this body, the rest of this nervous system. And so over time, after a couple of years of being in this sort of state of feeling like it's all just an illusion, which did, by the way, bring some peace, some relief from all the anxiety and all the suffering, that seemed to have, taken a big hit. It didn't really arise so much to such an intensity, but there was just a more of a neutral, stark, bleak, nihilistic sort of attitude toward the world, which didn't feel satisfying. It didn't feel fulfilling enough. So from there, what happened was I felt this like sort of this fire, like this oven in my heart was beginning to be stoked. And I can only describe it as feeling sad and melancholy and longing, yearning for God, yearning for the divine. Um, and though melancholy, it felt nice. It felt warm. and I could just sit in sadness and longing and have this sort of emotional experience, just wanting God. And I describe it as, on some level of in the level of the mind, I knew God on an intellectual level, but I didn't feel God. And my body began to say, I want to feel God in my body from head to toe. And so I would just sit and just feel this fire in my heart. And from here, a gentle movement began to rise in my spine. And at this point, it was a kriya, a spontaneous movement of the body. But I was just so surrendered, like so submissive, so innocent, that I just let it come, let it go. I didn't fight it off. I didn't get afraid like I did when I was much younger and I was having those spontaneous kriyas. Now my spine was getting warm. It was just kind of moving and dancing, and I just let it do its thing. Eventually, during a psilocybin journey, I was conducting this meditation, my hands on my heart. And at this point, my practice was just saying, I love you. With each breath on my heart, I would just say, I love you. And the prana, the light from my heart would radiate to the top of my head. It would radiate to the bottom of my feet. And everything that it would touch, I would love it. Thoughts, emotions, tension in the body, pain, fear, anything, it was all loved. And to me, love means the divine in me is recognizing the divine in all of the other aspects of me. So the divine is there in a thought, it's there in a tension, a pain, an emotion. It's there in my toe, in my anywhere in my body. It was all loved. And so in this meditation, I felt so immersed in love. I was loving myself. I was being loved by God. I was God. I was everything. I was nothing. And from there, there was this huge, energetic, explosive orgasm from the root, from my tailbone all the way up my spine. It exploded out of the top of my head. And I found myself in this huge, expansive place, completely out of my body. It was total oneness, total bliss, total transcendence. After an unknown amount of time, I returned back into my body and just said, whoa, that was intense. And because of the orgasmic nature of this experience, I thought, well, I looked down at, my nether regions there, and I thought there would be some sort of release, and there was nothing. It was completely dry. And I just thought, what just happened? I didn't know that such a thing was possible, to have such an intense experience. And I was looking around the room and I couldn't make a difference between myself and the walls, myself and the furniture. It was all one. And I thought, what is going on here? Over time, eventually, that oneness period began to sort of subside. I began to return back into an experience of separation. It was by the next day. And immense anxiety began to arise, immense tension in my body, emotional stuff, nausea. My head felt like I was simultaneously, 100 pounds and also the weight of a feather. So it was heavy and light, and it was just spinning and thoughts coming up and all sorts of like, I felt like when I was driving, I felt like my car might just become a spaceship and take off. It was really, really ungrounded, sporadic, energetic, very unstable energetically. And this was long after the effects of the psilocybin had worn off. So I knew that this was not just the trip; it was something due to what I had experienced. Eventually, after a couple of weeks, I described this experience to a friend, and she said, "That sounds like Kundalini awakening." I said, "Oh my God, Kundalini awakening! I knew about Kundalini, but I didn't explore it deep enough." And I thought that must be what I've experienced. And so she shared a talk by Ram Dass in which he describes his Kundalini awakening, and I said, "Oh my God, I've had the same thing happen to me." Okay, and from there I began to put the pieces together, and in putting the pieces together, I found that there was a lot of fear-based material around Kundalini, that it's demonic, that it's an illness, that it's a syndrome, that it's it's very dangerous, that we shouldn't mess with it. But I came intuitively to understand that this is a purifying fire. It's healing me. It's transforming me. This is what I've asked for. I wanted to explore, the divine. My body wanted to feel the divine, and I got what I asked for. The divine, that Shakti, that life force, that chi, that prana was activated and flowing through my system. And so I understood this is going to be an interesting ride, a difficult ride, but this is not a curse. This is a blessing. And so from there, my spirituality moved just out of being in the head deeply into my body. And then there was a bit of a journey around, sitting with all sorts of emotions were coming up, mystical experiences, memories, past life things, tension in the body, just raw stuff, collective stuff, all sorts of psychic phenomena. All of this was arising, and I just sat with it, trusting in the process. Similar to, when we go through puberty. I don't know anything about puberty. Did a pretty good job about it. I thought I can go through this process in the same way. I don't have to know every little detail about every single energetic phenomenon. What is this chakra doing, and where is my energy, and where's which nadi is active. I didn't need to know much about that. I could just trust and surrender like an innocent child. And earlier on, Sancheng, we were talking about the Tao is the mother of all. Kundalini Shakti, the Shakti is the divine feminine out of the Vedic system. She's also the divine mother of all, and I trusted her like her child. And from there, the journey just continued to unravel. Eventually, I was called to begin sharing what I could about Kundalini, about the awakening journey, because many, many others are going through this. Like myself, many don't know what they're experiencing. And because I found so much scary information, uh, information that was discouraging, I thought I've got to put out some stuff that's more empowering. And so I share on my YouTube channel, my podcast, from this place. I really appreciate the way you introduced me, as if I've got some mastery over this process. I like to always lead with, look, I don't have all the answers. I'm just here to start some conversation, share what I can. I give all credence to the Divine Mother as the master, and I share what she inspires me to share. But still, work is being done on my end. The journey never stops. I just now part of my work for myself is to share, and that brings up all sorts of other things. Maybe you felt it as well. There's insecurity. There's all the different challenges that come with being a teacher, being a guide. Many may think that once you become a teacher or a guide, that the work is done and now you're just giving, giving, giving. No, but we're also using the sharing, the teaching as context for further growth. And so that's the next frontier of my journey. So I can pause there, and we'll see what comes up for you as I share, Sanching.
Well, you just get me all giddy and happy and joyful and blissful and expansive just speaking on all these things because, you know, um, let's start first and foremost with, this alchemical transformation that takes place when you align yourself. And you were speaking on your very journey and how it's sort of like transmuted into this rocket man experience, which when people come to that realization and the streams are crossed and the what we call the three treasures are aligned, this type of stuff takes place. And there's Taoist words for it, just as there is Hindu, Buddhist words, however you want to put it. But I mean, when I look at your aura, it's really quite interesting because normally most people express at least the standard colors that come within the aura of just an average object, person, place, anything. There's always going to be the energy vortexes that are present, regardless of whether you are, evolved or not evolved. And then that sort of presents itself from someone like myself that just looks at what sort of like where is the emotion and virtue related to the actual development of this individual's energetic body. Yours is just white light and gold emanating. And then, really interestingly enough, you haven't really sort of had any type of like admission of any preference of a guiding force. You mentioned God. You mentioned a couple of other entities that you or spirits that you've encountered, but it's very clear there is this spirit energy that presents itself as a Shiva or something like this, and then you have Kuan Yin with like 9 arms, and then three. And this is the charge you and I are getting, and then three like what seems like images of the Buddha in threes, and they're sort of like floating all around your aura as you emit it, and it's like there's very much like physical traits that you may move in and out of, which would be representative of more of the emotional state of like anxiety still as something that you would express from your humanness. But just the expression of who you are on this conscious level is mind-blowing. Now, you kind of confess that you mentioned God, but your relationship with these other spirits clearly have some type of like cultivational practice within perhaps a past life or what you perceive today. Do you want to share with the audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when I refer to God, I refer to the force that is not separate from us, but that we can understand that it's not limited to just this body and mind. God permeates all, and
Oh
I,
yeah.
I I believe not even that I believe, I know that feel to be intelligent and supportive of those that long to know it, those that long to come into alignment with it. And so this is my relationship with it. I want to know God, and God supports me in knowing God on a deeper level. And so I relate to all of the deities. I recognize very early on that they serve to be mirrors for me, saying, "This is your potential. This is your
Yeah.
potential," as opposed to putting them up on a pedestal and saying, "I bow down to you," which I do often. And when I bow down, I am bowing down this mind, this body that um, is incapable of allowing the power of God to flow through me unimpeded. So that's the part that I bow down. But sometimes there's also this part of me that looks at the divine and say a statue, a Murti, an image, and I see it as a mirror, saying, "This is your potential." And this is what I understood. Like I referred to back at my period as an atheist, that was very empowering for me because I was, in some respects, curious. I was a clear slate, and I could become open to seeing the mirrors all around from this place. And you know, spiritual development, Kundalini awakening, it's a universal human phenomena. And so, if it's universal, well, then it will arise throughout the globe, throughout history, and it clearly has. And so, if it arises in one part of the world that hasn't had contact with another part of the world, when well, the experience is so profound that they are bound to create a cultural system around it, and bound to revere those that have achieved a high degree of spiritual development, and all sorts of motifs and language arises out of that. And so that's why we have a Kuan Yin and we have the Buddha and we have Shiva. Ultimately, they are the manifestations of the same God, the same field, right? And those who are experiencing the spiritual development process within themselves typically are very easily able to recognize the universal nature. And that's why we can look around and say, oh, I see what's going on with Shiva. I see what's going on with Kuan Yin or the Buddha, or we see it's there in Christianity, and perhaps someone like yourself with the clairvoyance can look around and see that so many individuals are experiencing pretty profound states, and the the expressions of it come through in so many interesting ways, and that makes it so universal. But I love to revere Shiva and to chant Om Namah Shivaya.
Well, that presence is second to none in your field. In these spirits, they shapeshift into the auric field of the individual. So I come across all different types of spirits that are associated with the individuals. I personally have my own teachers, Latsu and the three pure ones, that in my personal admission are facets of consciousness of the Tao, of the divine, of all things, and they present themselves to give me insight at will of what's necessary within my own journey. So they're my personal advisors and teachers on a minute by minute basis, and I can quite clearly see that you also have an affinity with your own crew, and that's emanating through your very presence, and it's really quite something, because normally I will see someone's general, as you would put it, chakra system, and they'll be in excess or deficient. So the colors will either be very dull or very bright, depending upon their own personal development in relation to their humanness. And then there's a whole nother entry level of consciousness that is the layered experience of spiritual, what some people might call awareness, consciousness, embodiment of all things. And you don't really, you have the, I mean, I can see the physical human experience if I look for it and I ask for it, but generally speaking, that's not what you're transmitting. And so with that, there's this level of, I am kind of like in a situation where out of body is a normal thing for me. Staying in that state of expansion is normal. And then of course there comes with it the flip side, which is that anxiety component that's left within the human experience that sort of presents itself sporadically or more it might take you a second to just inhale and go, oh, I'm following that narrative. No, that's not the real whoa. And with that, that's kind of like that balance, like that charge you and I got right now. Whoo! This is the attunement that we possess as consciousness, identifying as this flesh and blood as human beings, and then that in between sort of like amplitude that comes with sort of this crossing of all things. And so you get to embody your humanness, you get to embody consciousness, you get to embody your spirit. And I mean, all layers in between, how you perceive that is your journey. And so I always remind people it's never the right or wrong way up the mountain. And I love the way that you sort of confess your relationship with what you perceive as God, and then it starts to concentrate itself in these forms that are presented within your field, and just it's really powerful stuff. And then of course there seems to be some type of army of elephants that are surrounding you. And I was looking for Ganesh, and of course, he's there, which is another interesting element of enlightenment, and clearly something that you have a relationship with and are transmitting as a level of consciousness. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, Ganesh is he's my bodyguard.
That's exactly, it was interesting because I've come across him a couple of times, and he has a different sort of like meaning for certain individuals. But like I was sort of like hesitant to mention that, but it's like the army of elephants in representation of his presence, and then more like the I'm kind of like the security.
So I had an interesting experience in which I observed all of my guides like an entourage, and I
Hmm.
was actually able to uh, position them like a commander of an army.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I did that, and Ganesh, he walks backwards behind me, just kind of keeping guard, looking out. So I just feel
Oh
like
yeah.
he's got my back in that way. Um, I had an experience where I was chanting Om Gam Ganapate Namaha, and at one night I had this dream, and I was holding a baby Ganesh, a baby elephant, and it was just the cutest little creature, and it was this beautiful darshan. It was this beautiful, experience of connecting with Ganesh in that way, and so um, even very powerful in his innocent baby manifestation as well. But I must say, Sancheng, in our meeting here today, I'm experiencing a state of consciousness that I've never felt before. I'm quite intoxicated, and it's taking me to a new place. And so this is a very, very exciting experience for me. So thank you for such a great opportunity, really. And
My brother, it's all part of the collective. It's all an awakening, and you're so I'm just getting a here out here we call it PG&E, the electrical company, or the energy per se. I'm getting a freebie right now at a whole nother level.
oh I
And
like that.
that's attuning to both of our realization and awareness of this. And I'll go back to when you mentioned this present moment is the most powerful access point to all things.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's really, you know, um, how do I put it? Our meeting, reuniting with what has quite present to me as being past bonds and past lifetimes, and it all comes to this very moment. You know, I've transmuted and experienced many incarnations of probably in the last probably 200 lives or plus. It's all related to Taoism, but I have had other relationships as Catholic priests and Buddhist monks and yogis, and it seems to me that I'm gravitating to this present incarnation as the eternal immortal that is who I really am, and it resonates more with the theme of Taoism. But we're all facets of this, and we all sort of get a taste of everything. And when we realize that it's all happened already, we're experiencing something that has already exists. As much as we want to assume that we're perhaps creating a new lifeline, well, it is with Tom Campbell's admission of, what's the probability? You change that with your attention intention, and that's sort of like my bear witness to just the realization that I had as a young boy, a young man, and I was in a similar situation. I never even contemplated the idea of religious um, belief system or even spirituality or anything of that nature. I wouldn't have called at one point. I think I entertained the word as being an atheist, but it was never really something that sort of came to my mind. I just had this intuitive sense to believe in myself, and I can really see quite clearly this is a even though you're a mission of emotional states of that are variable, that powerful seed has been present for you your whole life also. And so that experience of what we would call or what social media would call the dark night of the soul, right? It's like I use that as a definition, but when I went through my own realization, it was like every thought, every feeling, every emotion nonstop for 5 days. And, very much a physicality response. I was vomiting when I would bear witness to a naked body or things that would be seen benign that you would watch all over social media. And it was having a revolt within my physicality that was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. And I potentially had the idea that maybe the best thing is to stop it. And I have to stop it. And the only way to stop it would be to finish this experience and move on to my next one. And of course, that never materialized as we speak. But the moment of this excess amount of information was so overwhelming that, your journey in cultivating that inner, internal, what we call inner power, Nigong, which is accessing that moment, which we call the Tao, the mother of all things, that resonance is so potent that you are like a beacon. You're a catalyst, a conduit for this very frequency, and it's a reminder to all people that surround you that walk within your presence. And you can give me a little bit more insight, but what I find is within a duality, and when we attune ourselves to this sort of resonance, you and I, when you walk into a room and people are operating in a duality, there's two things that come out of it. People either love you or hate you because of the circumstance of their perception of reality, because it's so much frequency, it's so much resonance that I call it getting a bucket of fish and you experience hillbilly hand fishing. You just reach in for an emotion and they're just sitting right there. And you are just, that it's just one after the other, after the other, after the other. And you can't make sense of it other than it's this person. That's why I feel this way. And because until otherwise notified, they're experiencing what they consider their reality. And you're the reason that you make me feel this way. What are your thoughts on that, Brent?
Yeah, so it's interesting where once our nervous system begins to expand energetically and we experience these states of oneness and we drop ideas of separation and we understand that we are all co-regulating our nervous systems together. There's a transmission not only of spiritual power, like what we're experiencing here, but there's also the transmission of emotion, of even thoughts, of beliefs. And these can, be gifts if they're nice. Somebody excited, you crosses paths with you, and you share some excitement. But they can also be some perhaps unwanted baggage at times, right? If you walk into a room and there's some exchange of some heavier, denser emotions. Um, in my experience, my attitude has become to be easy and unconditional with whatever's coming up. So I'm almost to a degree, though not perfect, but I'm somewhat impartial towards the emotional experiences that I have. If it's dense and heavy, it's okay. It's not going to last because none of it does. Just another experience, another roundabout sort of merry-go-round that eventually I'll get off this emotional experience or some tension in the body or whatever it is. And so I'm quite at ease. And I think because I'm at ease with that, generally speaking, I get the privilege to abide in more comfortable states. Because I'm okay with feeling, not so good sometimes, I tend to abide in a peaceful state. Not perfectly, not consistently, but even the times where it's not there, I know that it's around the corner. Um, and so I'm very easy like that. Um, I also find that because I have this outlet on the internet here, like you do as well, I don't do any work, spiritual work in person. And so in person, I just kind of go incognito and just sort of blend in with the people that I'm with. I don't have any intention to blast them with Shakti. I don't have any intention to, challenge their reality. I recognize that, like you, for many lifetimes, I spent doing spiritual work in isolation at times. In my prior lifetime, it was in isolation. And so I recognize I came into this lifetime to blend in and to operate in an incognito way. And in incognito, at times, I do have to blend in by getting a little anxious, getting a little upset, just blending in almost seamlessly with everybody else. Um, and when I come and I sit here or I do some work online, this is my space where I really drop in and and really open myself up as a channel. Now, over time, I do recognize that this is where, like I was saying, my work continues. So my work does continue, and over time, I do see myself abiding in a more and more open state, even when I'm out and about in the world with other people. Um, However, I don't, at least at this point in my journey, I don't feel called to be somebody that shakes up people's snow globes too much. I don't want to do that. I recognize and I respect everyone where they're at on their journey, and I don't see myself as coming to disturb anybody per se, if that makes sense.
Oh, 100%. Well, it's not even an admission of disturbing. It's energy, and I can show someone in a second switch on their energy body is the foundation of all things. So, whether consciously you can frame it to subdue your frequency if you choose to, which in your situation your mission is you choose to. I don't want to shake the tree a little bit, but it's not even shaking the tree. when that transmission comes up there, and as we're sharing with this very moment, that has a fundamental effect on people that are not aware of the simulation or the what they would perceive as their reality. They just know that something is coming up, and the only thing that I can identify with is this person is present that wasn't here before, and I'm starting to feel all these things that I cannot understand, because the energy will unravel regardless of what you're consciously aware of. And that's what I like to show people, that whether you are an atheist, a skeptic, someone who doesn't believe, I can show you very quickly the presence of how the energy flows within your physical body, and all the trappings that are around your very environment. And I like to just give people like a literally go to this point in your house, and there's a vortex of energy that specifically has been sort of like the cultivation of the earth and what it is doing with the very structure of the what you perceive as the home you live in. And that vortex is there, and people are like, holy crap, you've never been to my house before, how do you even know where it is? It's because all I do is ask, and it's given to me. And so when you mention that about how the thoughts would come in, and you, in the sense you were observing these things, and then they would just disappear per se, or not be, you wouldn't be attached to them. This is a level of, from my personal experience and how I train people, it's a level of awareness that takes place within your sensory perception, where the idea of being an observer is not an idea anymore. You are literally nothing. You're no place, person, or thing. And what happens is, if something comes in, a thought of any kind, the screen is black, and all I do is go, no, and it will literally burn up before my very eyes and disappear. So I'm never attached to anything, even the dialogue, because it is a dialogue until it's a monologue. When it's a monologue, we're in a whole different place. And a lot of people get caught in the dialogue, and they stay there. And that's the misconception that I see a lot of people get into when they're they start their spiritual journey. They get a glimpse of something, for example, i.e. a Kundalini experience, which is so powerful, and they sort of edge their way up to it. It's like, the idea of doing it, and then they hear all this, fear and brimstone and fire coming out of the sky, and don't do it. You got to be really careful. I remember when I started my journey as a priest, some of the first things that I did were like just not acceptable. Like I was doing exorcisms like 3 days into my experience over 30 years ago, and people are like, but you could be taken over by an entity. And I'm like, no, I just don't. I don't have any attachment. I didn't explain it as I was cultivating, but it was just like this fearless sense of knowing. It was like, okay, I can experience this entity attempting to enter my physical body. I can see it taking over the position and the guiding control system of individuals. And then I would exercise it with the individual, working with them collectively, even though, they're sort of like on this admission of, oh my goodness, this thing is taking over me. And it would be representative in their human experience by their personality traits, a whole heap of other things that would be representative. Or, as you would refer to them, chakras, we call them dantians, they would be all locked up. It would literally be nothing going on. And like the admission of the individual would be, oh my goodness, I'm just caught up in, I just don't know what's real. I don't, and this would be attributed to a psychologist looking at someone going, you have a personality disorder, you're schizophrenic, you're bipolar, you're all these different things, you're depressed, all these categories. And of course, the power of words. The second someone gives you a diagnosis, or you've given this power to someone else, then of course it becomes part of your reality, because you're already looking for validation. And so, all these sort of things vary, but the power that, when you mention that about that state, you can only speak on something like that if you've experienced it, from my opinion. And so there's a level of awareness that takes place where you literally, I always call it the master keeper creator of your reality. You choose. And people find that so perplexing, the idea that they can choose the state that they're in at will. And it's a mastery. The mastery comes from, and I find it even more intriguing when you say, I'm not really into any particular processes of cultivation. I just become the channel, which I think is beautiful. I tend to teach people more from an early stage. I started with an actual processes. Now, of course, all the rituals, all the ancient practices that are tens of thousands of years old within Taoism that I teach people is always the jump off point, just as we admit that, you know, all the spirits that we interact with, that we understand as a facet of consciousness, a facet of God, of Tao, is direct source information. And so, you know, you get to that point where, okay, at one point when I first started, I was working with the construct of this ritual that helped me obtain a level of consciousness through these layers. And now, you know, for me, it takes me, I'm already there, or it's not even it. I'm breathing and expressing through consciousness, and that's the present moment. That's the most powerful thing that you can do. And there's like this development, and I love the fact that everyone has their own development. There should be no one way up the mountain, and it's really powerful when, you know, teachers like yourself are able to share this insight, and it's so needed, because you mentioned that fear-based stuff with the Kundalini, and quite frankly, that's where my personality gets a little fired up. And so sometimes my personality will, people are like, well, you're in your personality, you're a priest. And I'm like, yes. And I would never erase your personality. Your personality likes ice cream and Netflix. It has nothing to do with consciousness. It's just your ability, as Tom Campbell would say, your ability, consciousness is your ability to choose an option. And so when you can really shift it, and that's where the energetics come in from me, is teaching people that internal alchemy so it's repeatable and they know when they're in that state. They're not questioning it. It's not like a moment of doubt. It's a knowing. And that pulpability from the energetics, I find, is very good at reinforcing that validation, because they know it's okay, this is now. And I'm experiencing in all these different layers, whether it's clairsense, mediumship, psychic stuff, channeling, healing. But that's that really palpable moment. Would you say that you, even though it's so, I mean, looking at your own awareness and your consciousness, you're an expression of consciousness, and how, holy moly, I mean, I just got to use it, you're literally, the evolution of who you really are has been replicated hundreds of lives before this, and it is a high state of just what within Taoism we call it an immortal, eternal state of knowing, and it presents itself. So there is a level of, as in Taoism we call it, if you have to learn it, you do not know it. If you know it, you don't have to learn it. And that's kind of like how I entered into my realization. I used the rituals to help develop my and validate, but I instantly accessed it. Like 30 years ago, I accessed Latsu. It was like first time, one time. I had a teacher, 60 years in channeling. He almost had a stroke. It's like, you did everything I've been looking to do for the last 60 years in 5 seconds. How is that possible? Because it's just where we're at. The entropy level, as Tom would say, was low. It was just the way it is. And as from your own admission, that's the same thing. You know, your journey is not in any way identical to mine, but I could safely say it's in parallel in this awareness. And, you know, expressing the human experience is something that some people like. They like it, they enjoy it, and it's a filter to sort of like keep stay in a rail, the two rails that are necessary. So you cultivate, Brent, in this space that you're in right now as a channel, and that I mean, the juice that you're putting out, you don't really have to do anything. It's not like, let's align the chakras, let's do. I mean, it just happens. It just is. As you know, it's like a palpable thing for the audience. What happens is, from my personal experience, it becomes more and more concentrated to a point where you just, that's it. It is. It's just your breath, your you are consciousness as an expression of all things. That's it. And so with that means that, Brent and I can go, I'll increase the energy, boom, expand this, boom, do that. And it's because you are the present moment, the universe. It's not asking, I'm not asking myself, hey, I need to give someone a healing. Could you help me out, universe? I mean, there's this separating part. And that's why I feel like I've always expressed it and realized it through my own journey, witnessing it over and over and again, the physical healings, is because it's that present moment. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we go right to the source, right to the source. So where did the rituals, the practices, the modalities, where did they come from, right? They didn't come from anyone's mind or someone's ego. The books about these practices and these rituals, the author was inspired channeling from the direct source. And so we all have access to that source as well. And so for me, I find that admittedly, I think I'm a little lazy. I don't want to engage in a consistent disciplined practice. I've never really have. And I beat myself up for a while because I couldn't consistently commit to a certain tradition, path, or process. Eventually, I understood, like I'm sharing with you. I said, well, where do these processes come from? Where did the original teachers get it from? I could just go right to the source. And so that's essentially where I landed. Um, Not to invalidate those processes and rituals, they're very effective for those that are inclined to operate in a particular system, for those that need that type of structure. But for me, I think it's due to my laziness. Um, I just went right to the source. And so very quickly, I can say access a certain state of consciousness, relax the body, go into a state of meditation, get an answer to a question. Some may say, okay, I need an answer. I'm going to consult the tarot cards. I'm going to use the pendulum. I'm going to do these things. Essentially, again, the answer from the same place. I just cut out the middleman, cut out the cards, cut out the pendulum, and go right to the source. So that just saves me time. And like I said, I've just been lazy. I think I've also been a little bit of a minimalist. I didn't want to complicate things with objects, also with practices. I didn't want to complicate things. And that's why, like I referred to earlier, the Kundalini process in my teaching, I remind everybody that this is not some new endeavor that we're figuring out. Like this is innate within your system. And I refer to the Kundalini process as not much different than puberty. And I think it's a perfect example because those that have made it past adolescence have experienced a very similar transformation. And so they're very familiar with the attitude, the approach that's needed. We didn't do any rituals for puberty. We didn't, think, oh, I'm going through puberty. I've got to start taking a bunch of supplements. You were kids. You probably, I mean, at least I can speak for myself. I was eating chicken nuggets, pizza, drinking pop. And still, I mean, I did a pretty good job of going through this transformation because I didn't meddle in the process. I didn't interfere with it. The source knew how to go through puberty, despite all the garbage I was putting in my body, despite staying up late and not sleeping well, it still carried itself out. The same way we can go through Kundalini awakening, and we don't necessarily need any specific approaches. They're useful at times. And for those that are in a very difficult place, they may find their way over to a healer, a guide who can offer, hey, conduct this series of yoga poses or this type of breath work that can help you. And that's great. Personally, I don't have any technical skills in that regard. I really don't know. I only bring people to a proper attitude, which is the attitude that they had through puberty, the attitude that, say, a mother had through pregnancy. They didn't say, oh, I have to start working on my baby's heart or my baby's brain, and oh, the due date's coming up, I better get ready. The body will get ready. It's gonna just happen when the time happens, right? You don't have to do anything except not get in the way. And the same goes for all of these expanded states. Same goes for getting an answer, like you said. You ask and it's given. I love the way you described there that when it shifts from a dialogue to a monologue. I think many that are inclined to engage in particular technical processes, rituals, practices, etc., they're operating from a paradigm of separation where they're trying to become what they actually already are. And when you're trying to become something, then there's a dialogue because there's you and there's a thing that you're trying to become. But the dialogue collapses into a monologue when you realize, well, how can I become something that I already am, right? I ultimately I am in a state of peace beyond my mind, beyond my body. I can access that place through, I guess you could say we do have to learn, however, to enter and drop into those spaces. We do have to learn how to enter into a state of surrender because we've been conditioned so much. But it's not something new. That's what I remind people. It's not something new. We're very familiar with this state. We're very familiar with it. You eat food, you digest it. I don't know anything about amino acids and nothing. I don't know anything about that. I digest my food. So we are very experienced in accessing this attitude and approach. We just have to translate it over to the spiritual process. And ultimately, I guess this is the beauty of the Tao as well, right? The Tao is flowing. We flow with it. We just have to find how to get into that flow, right?
Yeah, I mean, right from the scripture. I actually just finished working with Latsu on transcribing a 2024 version of the Tao Te Ching, and so using that in concert, because on a deeper level, each verse is an incantation, and it has 81 different levels of consciousness that you enter into when you're experiencing the Tao Te Ching. And so when people read this new transcribed version that Latsu has sort of updated, they're going to have a huge awakening. And you can use it in concert with other things that he's sort of put together to help someone that is entering into this realm of, wow, there's something greater out here. And I'm resonating with this messaging because, I mean, from his own admission, he received the Tao, or the Tao Te Ching, from the universe, whispers of the universe, into his very construct of his mind, and then it translated into him transcribing that into the very text that is probably the most translated religious or spiritual text in all of history. And so, it sort of transmutes into something else, and it's a level of awareness. And I do agree that you need to develop a way to obtain this, and this is why I always give people, these moments of epiphanies, whether it's a physical healing, mental, emotional healing, spiritual healing, but it can be validated within this 3D reality, because that's my main goal, is to raise the collective consciousness. So how that happens is you take someone that would just perceive 3D reality as true and show them something that is not in their wildest imagination possible. And then that translates into, I need to now look deeper. I need to now understand how did that take place. I had a physical sickness, whether it's cancer, broken ankle, gangrenous flesh. I've seen it all. I should really just write a book on the thousands of healings that physical healings I've witnessed in my natural born life over the last 30 years. There's never a limit. And I'll always enter my next experience with that very understanding. There is no limit to consciousness, And so with the Kundalini, this is we have, a couple of different levels of awakening. A basic straight line version, which is more vanilla, that most people are aware of, which is called the microcosmic orbit. And so that's sort of like what we call, within the realms of manipulation of man, the rice bowl version. And so a lot of teachers will take people down the path of never realizing their true potential with something that's sort of been bastardized, and the eyes have been picked out of it. I've never seen a real microcosmic orbit on this side of the world anywhere. And so when I teach this sort of fundamentals, we go into what we call the infinite Wuji body, and that evokes a very similar polarizing effect that is, to many people, accessing the sacred secretion of all things, being this awakening, and that's the Kundalini awakening, the Wuji body awakening, and we activate what we call the sacred infinite flower up here in the upper dantian, and everything is illuminated in gold, bright white light, and your whole body is going to take off to another dimension, because you have this supercharged sensory perception that you've never experienced before, which would be in similar experiences to a Kundalini awakening. And so now, what do you do with it? Now, you've come beyond physiology, psychology, biology, neurology. That was limited. Now you're experiencing something you can't define, and the sensory perception, in my opinion, is limitless. It's not. Most people are like, oh, it's five, and then we got the sixth sense, and you've got an infinite amount of senses, and it really is determined by how much you want to, as you mentioned before, surrender and just allow yourself to be this present moment. And you and I speak on it, and we speak on it with very much this knowing. But the truth is, that's it. People are like, well, what else? I mean, how many guides? What? It's truly that simple. And I always remind people can follow me. They can be a student. They can be listening to a podcast, do whatever. In that very moment of you listening to what I'm saying, you could realize this very moment and access all things that I have come to know over hundreds of lifetimes instantly. And that's never off the table. Always, people need to always understand that that awakening is an option, and that can be realized instantaneously. And it transmutes into this energetic architecture that we're familiar with, and that's another validator of your very experience. So when you do this stuff, Brent, and you've also, you've confessed, I'm not big on practices, but you are, though. You're living this, you're breathing this, you are consciousness, and it's evident in your auric field. It's evident in your expression of all things. And okay, yes, I've got a little bit more development within clear senses, that I see things with my eyes open. I'm not looking at it in my third eye. It's that turned on like over 30 years ago, and it's a developmental skill that anyone can acquire. And I've taught hundreds of people the very skill. And once it's on, it's on. It doesn't leave you. There's a level of concentration that takes place. This is not like you're coming from the physicality, as we briefly spoke on when it comes to exercise and weightlifting and things of that nature. You will that access will diminish if you're not putting your intention to it. Whereas this type of mastery, I define it as mastery, never leaves you. It only gets more concentrated, and the more intention you put to it, the greater the awareness. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the way that people within the Kundalini awakening community may discuss it is there's fear of, okay, I've had a big awakening. Will it go back to sleep, right? And in some respects, there are like sort of minor stirrings, minor activations that are very short-lived, a day, a week, a month, and then without, like you said, attention or intention, without proper support, the Kundalini can go back into a dormant state, and it's almost as if nothing ever happened. But once there's a major rising takes place, once there's a major awakening, your state of consciousness is going to be changed, and it will continue to the process itself will continue to unfold over the rest of your life, perhaps even the rest of your existence into the next incarnation. And so there shouldn't be necessarily fear of losing the development that we've made. It's almost like fearing, like, we can go in reverse through puberty, for example. It's not like that. But we do have to support the system with proper attention, proper intention, listening to the system. And self-care is very important. It's a fundamental part of the way that I support others is Well, we have to pay attention to self-care, supporting this body with the basics, the very basics: proper hydration, movement, eating well, socializing, bringing attention to what's coming up in terms of our emotions. These very, very basic things allow this process to flourish, or allow this expanded states of consciousness to continue to expand. There are some instances where people maybe are prone to addiction, substance abuse, alcoholism, and that can sort of stunt the process, dull the process, make things seem very mundane, as well as some medications, some pharmaceuticals. Of course, not a doctor here, but this is what I've observed. And what I've observed, however, even to your point, there is, I was speaking to somebody some time ago, and it's not an unusual story, but they have some sort of spiritual opening, spiritual awakening experience. They are diagnosed with a certain mental health issue, given medication. The phenomena ceases. They get back to their ordinary lives, and everything seems very mundane and ordinary. And at some point, for whatever reason, of course, if one is going to stop taking their medication, it should be done according to what their doctor advises. But some people will come to a point where they no longer feel like taking the medication, they wean off of it, and very early on after that, they're suddenly back into a full-blown spiritual awakening, a Kundalini awakening process. Their third eye comes back online, and they're saying, "Oh my God, it's happening again." Um, and I've encountered a handful of people with this sort of narrative, which shows that yes, there are some ways that we can dull it, but it never completely goes back to sleep or completely gets shut down. Ultimately, it's still lingering there beneath the surface, and the moment there's a bit of a crack, it will emerge. And so, something to keep in mind, but also nothing to fear, but also a good way of discerning where we might be on the path. Once a
Yeah.
full awakening really begins to flourish, like you've been changed. There's no going back. There's a significant shift in the way that you relate with your mind, your body, your spirit, the world. Um, that doesn't end. It's just an ongoing, continuing blossoming of this new states of being.
Yeah, I mean that's where I would fall on cultivating,
Mm,
because part of the Taoist model is really interesting because most people put Taoism and Buddhism in the same category, but they're so fundamentally different. And people are like, "What are you talking about? It's that Eastern philosophy stuff." And oh, we're at one with the universe. Well, the I had a Buddhist monk on just 2 days ago. I'm going to publish that soon. And the journey of a Buddhist is to find all the pain and suffering within this lifetime and to maximize it, so it will you know burn out, so they come in, re-up, and it's a whole new experience. Whereas, so I kind of attribute it to this: a Buddhist experience is a pile of dirt covered in diamonds, and they spend their life taking another diamond off, looking for some more dirt. And listen, it's, you say tomato, I say tomato, and that really comes back to the seed of how deep your awareness is, right? Whereas a Taoist looks at life like a pile of diamonds covered in dirt. Take off another piece of dirt, and here's another diamond, and that's where we cultivate the physicality. So when you really attune your internal alchemy, i.e., the inner power, and you get that humming that you can at will, just as Brent and I do. But like there's a fundamental shift. Like when you have a Kundalini experience, it's like turning a light switch on, and so you're burning in the infrastructure of your energetics inside your physical body. And people are like, whoa. And so now you have this system that you're now aware of. It's like, hello, over here. And so the more and more you invest in cultivating the infrastructure, i.e., what we call the dantians, which is the energy field, you actually, from a Taoist perspective, you come into your life and you have a constitution that normally most people, due to their genetic framework, their ancestors, they come in out of 100% battery, they come in around 70, 80%, with the potential of hitting 100, depending on your genetic makeup. Now, this is what we call Qing, your constitution. Now, from a Taoist perspective, we first show you the inner alchemy aspect, we rev that up, we open that up, Kundalini, Wuji body, sacred infinite flower from our perspective, open that, it's now on. Now we level your battery up to 100%. Now it's at 100. Now it's at 100, that's just us getting started. Now we'll go to 1,000, 10,000. And so then there's this innate understanding that you are actually consciousness, and what we call primordial breathing, embryonic breathing, is a much deeper understanding of that, where you're no longer breathing from your physicality. You're not accessing your physicality. So this is the vehicle, the anchor that can help register your conscious experience so that you can take it through this lifetime. And so when we saturate the cells and we become the maestro of those 50 trillion cells that you possess in a physical body, you can then concentrate that energy any way you want. And it's not just about feeling it. It's transmuting into manifestation, magic, healing. And then there's another validation, another notch up of your consciousness. Wow, I just experienced this moment with this person, and I shared the energy, and they had a physical healing. I watched flesh transform before my very eyes. Oh my goodness. Or, oh my goodness, I had this intention. Like, what I've been doing this a long time. So, for example, I got pulled over by the cops the other day, right? I'm driving with my family. I've got my wife and 6 kids in the car and driving along. And woo, okay. Now this, you start assessing things from a spiritual aspect of understanding, well, this is your manifestation. This is your making. This is your attention, intention. You are putting out, and the universe is giving you back what your attention, intention is putting out. Now, when you get really skilled in your mastery, and Nigong is what we call the example of being present in every dimension at once. That's the whole purpose of it. So you have a new definition of multitasking, that you can transmit energy, frequency, vibration equally in all dimensions at once. So your probabilities from Tom Campbell's perspective, they go from 1,000,000 to 1 to 1 for 1 for guaranteed what's going to happen. So with that cultivation practice, this cop pulled us over, and both of them were in incredible fear. They came from behind the car. I have like tinted windows. They're like, open the back window, open. And, my wife is sitting there with my kids, and the windows are down. I'm driving, and the first thing I said, my personality. You see, do not erase your personality, ladies and gentlemen. It's just part of the experience. The mastery is to realize that you do not have to give it attention if you choose not to. You do not have to entertain your personality, and that the more you can identify that, you can literally put it in the corner of the room and tell it to sit quiet, silently. And when I want to observe something that potentially could be of interest to me, I'll bring you back in the room. This is the observer, the first person, third person, no person that we speak of is that present moment. So on a face value, you'd look at me going, you're a priest and you've got a little personality. And this guy has his hand in his holster and he's walking up towards the car, license and registration. And I'm like, can I please ask you why you're even in your mind thinking of drawing your gun on my family? And then he's like, license and registration. And of course, I'd already created a seed in another dimension that would end this whole experience. And so I handed my license and registration. I said, do you need a hug? And like, this is a person who's presenting themselves as authoritarian, not in my world. And so he just took it and walked. I'm going to write you a ticket and come back. And I've already changed the shift of consciousness, and people are like, well, don't you have to just be in the state of love or oneness? Well, I altered the whole thing before it even happened. And this is what we call Shen projection, spirit projection. And this is deeper into the magic, which is sort of layered in the architecture of manifestation. And so when you start to understand how these mechanisms work, it's all predicated on the understanding of the face value of what is presented before you, and it's operating in a duality. So if you understand how to move those energies, it changes instantly. And so what happens? He comes back with a smile on his face. He hands me my license and registration, says, Don't do that again. You have a nice day. What a beautiful family you have. Now, most people will be like, how in Tao's name did you do that? And it's just a mastery of consciousness that on face value, you look at me, I've already sidestepped. You're still immersed in the idea that my personality is even running the ship here. It has nothing to do with that. I'm in another state of consciousness, but on face value, you would perceive that my personality was engaging in this very event. And so this is a shifting, just like your admission earlier about how the thoughts come in and you have a decision to make and you can choose not to engage with them just in the same level of dimension, and you're already onto something else. And that is what I call a mastery and that pulpating energetic component. And that's where I would just ponder the potential for yourself if that's something that you even want to entertain, because that's already accessible to you, but it's not something that perhaps maybe it's even been presented to you as a need to even access that. But I find that these types of events are really important because I'll teach students to start with simple things like there's a sound in the background, dog barking in the neighborhood. Okay, mute that sound and stop the dog barking. And they're like, "What? What are you talking about, Shifu? What? Yeah, it's all attention, intention, and you can change the frequency, the energy, the vibration instantly. And so, with your attention intention, change the frequency of the dog using resonance and show me." And they're like, oh. And it happens that quickly, and people become quite amazed of their ability to access these states of consciousness. And wetting your whistle on the old parking ferry, I don't know whether you heard of the parking ferry, but I mean, I like to use that as an entry level for most people because it's so benign. It's so like, hey, look, it all comes down to your simulation of your humanness and your emotional state, and realizing that these are just transient sort of like moments that can come and go, yet we embody them as this idea that turns into a belief system due to your environment that these are real and that you need to stay in that. Now you've attached it to a place, person, or thing, and this is your new reality. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I know you had Tom Campbell on your show. His book, My Big Till, My Big Theory of Everything, really opened me up to these uh, potentials that we do have the ability to abide in multiple dimensions simultaneously. I believe he calls it the non-physical dimension. And so this really opened me up um, to what you're speaking about here. And I began to have experiences similar to what you were describing with, being pulled over, that revealed to me that I do have an influence on the way that life unfolds. I do really have a sense of control with what you're saying there, attention and intention. And so from there, this really served me to expand my understanding of who I was, my power of what's really going on here in reality, and to make up my own theory. Now, at this point in my journey, I think going back to how I said I'm pretty lazy, I'm pretty lazy even when it comes to shaping my own reality. I've given a lot, if not yet all, but I've given up a lot of my life up to just service. And I just bow down over and over again and I just say, use me. I know I can, bend reality and do all of this and that. I understand that this is an avenue I can explore. However, part of me just feels lazy that I see that there's some work that I have to do there. But what doesn't feel taxing on me whatsoever is being of service and just opening myself up as a channel and saying, inspire me, lead me to the right conversations to have, uh, energize me to, put out some content online for others and give me some ideas of what to share. And that's where I sort of find myself. And I trust that if a particular event is meant to arise in my life, the divine will manifest it for me and there will be some purpose for me, either some lesson, some growth, maybe some reward due to some growth that I've done already. But this is a bit of my lazy approach, and I acknowledge that there's a lot of potential there that I haven't really tapped. I haven't yet fully explored, and perhaps it is also some underlying latent fear of the power that you're describing, unworthiness of having such power to influence reality in such direct, instantaneous ways. You know, to make a dog stop barking instantaneously. There's something a little, ooh, that's a lot of power to wield. I don't know if I can be responsible enough to have that much power. So that also arises at times. But ultimately, I find any power here, I've repeatedly, I relate with the Divine Mother and I say, just use me. I'm a vessel. I'm open here. Use me for whatever it is that you need. And if there's something I'm meant to be, to be taught and shown, show me. There are powers that I'm meant to be given, show me, but also give me the wisdom to use them appropriately. And so this is my attitude, but there is an infinite amount of power that we carry, and this reality is waiting for us to use it in some way or another to tap into, what we are really capable of. And so you've given some great examples, and I'll admit I'm a little inspired. I might have to try and make some dogs start barking in the neighborhood.
Well, when I think it's a great admission of yours. When you realize that you're actually returning to homeostasis, so it's like you're returning the fluidity. So what you're really doing is creating the fluidity, the obstruction, the entropy of whatever that situation, that circumstance is being brought right down, and that's really your intention is to bring it back to the flow of the universe, as we would put it, wu wei, effortless action. So when you approach it like that and understand that it's not so much the idea of manipulation, even though it's very easy to do, it's your entropy level becomes very low when your intention is to create and embody all things at once. And so that creates harmony as one of the effects. So when the healing that police officer got was started with fear and anxiety, with the potential of something greater, confrontation, all these things were building within him. And from the time he left the car to go back to his car and come back again, he received a complete realignment, which in turn created a different demeanor, a different perception, a different reality. And he was open. He was grounded. He had received a physical, mental, emotional healing that presented itself in just the way that he conducted his interaction with myself and my family. So in essence, what was taking place was the recalibration of that energy and making that fluid. Does that make sense?
Service. Yeah, an act of service,
Mm.
in such a profound way, right? Um, it's funny they say the police, right, to serve and protect. Well, I mean, you served him and perhaps protected him.
Well, yeah, I mean the reality of all of this stuff, it starts being based in fear, and right from Tom Campbell's mouth, that's the first red flag. And from a Taoist perspective, the first thing you want to do is realize that your emotions don't control you; you control your emotions. And people are like, "Whoa, that sounds pretty controlling." Well, not really. It's a part of identifying the first person, third person, no person understanding of reality, that nothing has title. There is no title. There is no place, person, or thing. That is that epic moment. And I use that when showing people how to do things that are consciously shifting, like the simplicity of bending metal, right? And being able to focus your intention on a point of the actual object, and it, with your intention, it transforms the construct of it, and it bends like butter. And then so you go to bending, say, metal with a physical force, to holding an object and witnessing with your attention intention it melt like butter. And then finally, the graduation is taking a fork and bending the prongs in either direction that you want. It's a higher state of consciousness. And this all comes from no emotional state. You are just the present moment. And you are, as some people would call, the consciousness, the universe, and you just like bend. Excuse me, that's it. And if you, the validation of this, just this idea is you come across a lot of people that have bending spoon parties across the internet, a level of telekinesis, pyrokinesis. These are other states of consciousness. And, these are, if you just watch from face value, and most of them sort of get to the first level of, if I use some force and I focus my attention, it just seems to bend. And so they use this incantation and they start screaming at it, putting the present moment as the state of where they need to be, and they get a result. They're like, whoa, hang on, what? I just bend. And with that amplitude of energy that you and I just experienced, you connect with that. And so from a clairsense view, you watch it bend before your very eyes. And physical flesh is no different. You will see it wiggle and shift before your very eyes. And it's like, whoa, it's just this present moment. And, I love to show people. So it's always like oh, really? No, I wasn't interested in that. No, that's like you showing me God. I was only just asking, inquiring. I didn't actually want to actually experience it. And that's where there's this like contraction that people have. And, that's why you like to, I like to do these types of things in variables that shift someone's consciousness. They have no alternative. And so, something like the parking ferry is just the idea of, you take an idea going, I want a parking space at the front of somewhere. And you just quietly have this, monologue. Well, at first it's a dialogue. And I'd really like a parking space. Could you help me? And strangely enough, without the emotional content, and you're thinking, what have I got to lose? I got nothing to lose. What, I'm not telling anyone. I'm not telling my partner that's sitting right next to me in the car. I'm just thinking, you know what? Sun Qing said, just think it and it becomes reality. And it happens the first time. And they're like, that's a coincidence. Then it happens 20 times. And they're like, ooh, hang on a second. There's something here. What's going on? And it all has to do with that emotional content where you step out of the way and the fleeting moment of, and people drive down the street and they do it. I want that car to move out of the way. Whoa, it just moves. And once you do it 100 times, you're like, well, what's the correlation here? What is, and it comes down to physical healing, mental, emotional, spiritual healing is all the same. There's no exception, but you get caught up in the outcome. When I do any type of like clairsense stuff or sensory perception, I'm not invested in the outcome. It's not mine. I spent a fleeting moment when I first witnessed a physical healing over 30 years ago, where I really had a moment of, I cannot share this with anyone. I want to be the only Jesus Christ that walks the earth, because it was like so overwhelming. And but before the day was out, that had gone and had left me. Yet it was so profound that I was like, oh my goodness. What? Shit. And so, of course, since then, understanding, and the very next moment was, your gift is your offering. I'm like, oh. So when you give, you receive. So the more you share, the more you open the conscious collective, the more you will receive, and it will continue to expand on itself. So, within Taoism, I'm kind of like coming from a place where a lot of people will never see I've never seen any of the stuff that I teach people, because it's been in such secrecy. And a lot of people, even people that claim to be evolved Taoist, teachers, have never seen the stuff that I share with people. And it's for everyone. My teachers, the three pure ones, Lao-Tzu, have made it very clear, it's for everyone. Everyone needs to experience this conscious collective. And the raising of that comes from people like Brent, like myself, where we're able to awaken this dormant Kundalini energy that opens your lens to a whole new reality. That is the truth, not the delusion that is being sort of fortified and manipulated over the history of humanity to make you separate. You are not separate. You are one. And that's fundamentally the deeper understanding. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we are not separate from one another and from the other phenomena rising in the world. It's very interesting. Tom Campbell's work opened me up to these ideas, like I was sharing. And one of the experiences I had around this was actually, I began to ask, well, show me some more evidence. Show me some more. I want to see more. In terms of Tom Campbell's teachings about how we, have so much potential to, with our consciousness, to shape the way our life unfolds. And I was working at a restaurant. I was in my teenage years working in a restaurant, and a new guy just hired because I was actually leaving. He was actually my replacement. So I was training him a little bit before I had, moved on from that job. And he mentions a particular term. At the moment, I can't remember which term, but it's a very specific term in passing in conversation about who knows what. And I just said, where did you hear that term from? And he says, my big toe, my big theory of everything. I thought, what the hell? Like, I just finished reading that book. It was dense book, right? It took me about 6 months to read. It's very dense book. I'm like, what are the chances that the two of us would be washing dishes together? We both read this book that is just a really heavy read. It's not even super popular. And Tom Campbell is absolutely amazing, but it's not really, a super popular book. I'm like, what are the chances that the universe would bring us both together? So around the book itself, I was given evidence of the validity of what was being talked about our intention, what we ask for. We tune to those particular realities with our consciousness. We can find our way through the world in very interesting, magical ways. And so that was the first sort of invitation, the real invitation. I thought, okay, I got to really explore what's going on here. Because this guy that I'm washing dishes with here, it's not that by chance. There's something going on here. And so I went really deep, and this was a huge a theme in my journey that I explored. And I continued to explore. But eventually it led to this, major Kundalini rising and all of the challenges that came with that, and now I'm doing this work here, sharing and connecting with so many great people like yourself. So it's it's only just it keeps getting better. It keeps going deeper, and it keeps getting better and better. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, I can't even thank the universe. It's like I wish we weren't on. I'm on a little time restraint because I've got another podcast literally at 11, which I would prefer. Normally, my technical support and my inner workings of the profound infrastructure of my administration, being my beautiful wife, normally gives me 3 hours because as you know, with the Tom Campbell interview, if you watched it, we disappear. Now, personally, I would like to continue this conversation, and I want to broaden our understanding of each other in the near future, if not tomorrow. But that will be for your schedule, and I want to suggest that as an option. Um, this has been profound today, my friend.
Yeah,
Really.
really a great treat to connect with you. Now, unfortunately, tomorrow I've got a bit of a busy day, but I would love to, pick up and continue to chat. It's been really profound. There's some great, very potent gems of wisdom that you've dropped for me and for our audience in general. But I must say that you've picked up on some key points in my journey and given me a lot to contemplate and a lot to chew on. So thank you so much for being such an in-tune messenger and channel.
And I concur. I would like to offer you the same appreciation. I'm very grateful for your insight and your mastery of where you're at and realizing the true nature of who you are. And that with that raises consciousness, that incredible moment and the in service, as we speak of, the selfless default. When you are selfless, you will realize it, and it will become effortless. Time will be void, and you just move. You're not counting the seconds, you're not counting the minutes, it just is. And that's where people kind of get a really a reality check on how much their life is half empty, when they're just like, it's only been an hour, oh my goodness, I got another 4 days of work, I can't wait to the weekend. That doesn't seem to be our problem, my friend. It blends, and quite frankly, most of the time I don't even know what day it is or what time of the day it is. And so, in closing, until our next meeting, and I definitely want to, we'll correspond after this, and make that happen very soon, hopefully the next week or two. What is your definition of consciousness, my friend?
Consciousness is all there is. This human nervous system is made of consciousness, but it can also experience the flow of consciousness. Bit of a paradox there. I feel that our work here as human beings, over the course of as many lifetimes as it takes, is to see how much consciousness, how much of that Shakti, which is the flow of consciousness, the energetic component of consciousness, how much of that can we allow to surge through this nervous system, to express itself, to radiate, to fuel our creative endeavors, to inspire us. I think that's our work here. So consciousness is all there is, but this nervous system, for some, when we are tense, we don't have consciousness flowing through the nervous system, through the nadis, through the energy system. But when we're open, relaxed, we've done our work, we're in alignment, the flow of consciousness can really be felt, it's palpable. And that's what we felt today together. So that was a really great treat. It feels like I took a deep dive into that flow with you. So thank you so much. I hope that our audience can pick up on a little bit of that as well.
All the OGs of the channel, students, people I know, will be like, oh, whoa, this is a doozy. And a lot of them tend to just keep replaying the episodes when I'm either teaching someone an exercise, or I have this profound, like, conscious, like, collective moment, that the one that you and I had in this podcast. It's just profound, and it's palpable and validated by the very kinesthetic charge that you receive, which is second to none. And so, with that, in closing, I'm going to put all your social media under this podcast. And what would you like to share with the audience today, Brent? What's going on with you right now?
Oh, well, thank you. So, of course, I have my YouTube channel. I have my podcast, The Spiritual Awakening Show, and I would love to invite you, Sanching, on for an episode. We'll unpack your journey and look at the Kundalini awakening process through your lens, through the Taoist lens. So that I'm very excited about that.
I'm very excited about that.
So I have my YouTube channel, my podcast. I also have a new project that I just began earlier this year. It's called KundaliniAwareness.org. And the intention behind this project is, of course, to raise awareness, because many people are challenged by their Kundalini awakening process. They're labeled as, something wrong with them, crazy. And so this website, the aim is to be a landing page of sorts for those that are, trying to find their way around this journey, but also a place where those on the journey can send their friends, family, therapists, whoever it is that they would like to inform about what they're going through. So KundaliniAwareness.org, we're looking for some more stories of individuals that have undergone a Kundalini awakening process. Perhaps you're in the midst of it. We also have a directory of licensed mental health professionals that have Kundalini awakening experience, that are able to offer support to others. So we're trying to shift the culture around the mental health conversation, so that people aren't necessarily dismissed, labeled as crazy, but in fact they are recognized as being going through a valid human universal experience, the expansion of consciousness. Kundalini is, of course, perhaps one of the most popular terms, but this is a universal human phenomena, as we've discussed today. And we'll unpack a little bit more of that with you, Sanching, on my podcast, and we'll see where things go from there. So
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I am so excited about your diving into this and validating people's personal experiences, and not labeling it as a psychotic episode, and realizing that there is so much more to it. And yeah, I really want to go deep on that when I get on your podcast and really help people understand, because it's just an empowerment moment. But from the same second as someone saying yay, you can say nay. And the powerful concept or knowing that we have about placebo, nocebo is just that. And so, someone can absolutely, and I experienced this so many times over my lifetime, where someone will just come in at face value with a certain perception and say that I believe this, but in actuality, on a deeper understanding in the back of their unconscious process, revealed the very nature of what they were thinking. And then, of course, that transmutes into their reality, i.e., I'm going to beat cancer. You say it, but you don't believe it. And that feeling is critical to that realization. And that's why I think Kundalini is such a powerful a vehicle for that, because it is a full sensory experience that comes at every angle. And, it's like, now I've turned it on. Now I need to be in a community where I can start, nurturing this nervous system experience. I love the way you say that, because the nervous system is the tuning fork, the validation of your experience. So when people say they're going out of their body, it's still all being registered as this experience, like the charge we're getting right now. Again, we could be here all day, my friend. I'll just tell my wife and kids we'll take a breather for a couple of days, because this is what happens when you attune at that frequency, and it's second to none. And this is, I believe, is my mission, and I don't want to speak for Brent, but I believe this is his mission, to help people awaken to this very moment.
Yeah, right on, right on. Well, thank you for giving me an opportunity to take another step on the path on my mission, and I appreciate the opportunity and the platform. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so grateful that you're here. I'm going to thank the universe again for bringing you into my life. I'm very grateful. I've reunited with a bond that I've had for many lifetimes with you, my friend. And now it's realized, and we're going to be back and forth on each other's channels quite often, because I would really like to always have access to insight that others are not perceiving. It's all conceptual. And when you can have the type of understanding and consciousness like the one that you're having in this lifetime, it needs to be shared with everyone. Everyone needs to, because once they witness it, it can become realized for themselves. This is the conscious collective. So in closing, I want to thank you so much, and I look forward to getting you back on really soon, and we'll work out when I can get on your podcast. I'm really excited about that. And again, I want to thank the audience for spending their time with us today. I'm very, very grateful. And in closing, I am your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master Sun Qing, and I will see you on the next one, guys.